We are live.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Atomix's first Founder Hacks podcast. So we're really excited to be able to do this and share with you what's become for us a wonderful part of how we work together, which is coming together once a week to share what we've seen, so real stories from real businesses that we're working with, something we've read that's really inspired the founders that we work with, and something we've learned. So something we've taken away that may inform what we do differently in future in our businesses. So really delighted to be launching our podcast today, and with my very good friends and partners in many things, but mostly business, Mr. Alex Moore.
Hello.
And Mr. Anthony Enright.
Hello.
Fantastic. So without further ado, we're going to crack straight into it. And I think this week, it's been a challenging week for so many of the businesses we're working with. But I believe, Anthony, what have you seen? What have you seen this week?
Thanks, Ben. I think it's really interesting that one of the major things that I've seen this week, and maybe a theme of our podcast today, which will become obvious as we go through, is how are businesses coping in the current situation, but also what have they done as organizations that's brought them to be successful so far, and what are the things that they need to do, what are the things they need to keep as they continue on that journey to growth and scale, and what are the things that they need to change. And one of the things that I've seen happen is an organization that's had considerable success in a very short period of time. Well, they've reached a turnover of around 4 million, a headcount of about 20 staff. And they've done that by having one meeting a week. So they only have one meeting a week. And so it actually leaves...
I want to work there. Perfect.
And I just wondered, I wanted to pose the question of what would that be like for your business or anybody's business to just have one meeting a week? And how productive would that be? Or what are the downsides for maybe if you went to one meeting a week? But what they've seen happen is they've got real brevity in the way that they operate. And there's really quick ways of discussing a problem, thinking about and debating possible solutions, and then just going for something. And they're not always sure whether it's the right thing that they should be doing next or not. But it's just, let's go do it, and we'll review it when we come back next week. So it's just a real sort of, feels very agile way of working, to just come together. What are we here to do? What are we here to achieve? Where am I stuck? And then they move on, and they just spend a week actually in real execution mode. And it's worked for them so far. The big question for them now, of course, is it going to work for them as they go from 4 million to 6 million to 8 million to 10 million? But it's certainly worked. So I just pose that question again. What do you think it would be like in other businesses if it was just one meeting a week?
Wow. I immediately think that it's a sort of full of admiration for being able to do that, because I've seen so many times businesses that just become factories for meetings, and frequently they're not entirely thought through. And one of the things I'm sure Alex will talk about in a minute is some of the stuff that he's done in his businesses around rules around meetings. They start on time, they finish on time, must have a purpose and agenda. But I think that's a fascinating challenge to say, can you cope on one meeting a week? What are your thoughts, Alex, on this one? I have a feeling you might quite like the idea.
Yeah, I do a lot, actually. One of the founding principles of one of the businesses that I founded was, structure will set you free. And the whole idea was that meetings were quick, punchy. People wrote things down, equal talk time, which I think is a very, very important side of things, because we'll maybe talk about that a little bit later. And sort of, there's a purpose to the meeting. There's no meeting without an agenda. These are all pre-agreed rules from the team. The meetings were punchy. You got in, you were heard. Cognitive diversity, which is something I'm really big on. So it's not this sort of who's speaking, who's the most senior, who's the highest paid person in the room, something we'll touch on later. And, meetings can end up being, I found, when they're structured in that punchy way, that they were quite energizing. And when a bad meeting, I attend a bad meeting with bad energy, I find it really demoralizing and draining energy. And yeah, keeping those meetings punchy, and then letting people, just trusting people to be left alone and then go and do it. And then you all check back in. I think the key thing to me is everyone is accountable to each other. So it's that works really well. People write down what they need to do, and then the next meeting, everyone checks back in and said, right, what did you do? Last time you said you were going to do this and this and this. And that contract, that sort of contract between everyone present is quite energizing, and it builds trust. And, you know, this whole feeling of this person's got my back. If I go on holiday, they can do this. And, you know, I find like good, I don't mind. I said earlier, I hate meetings, but I hate bad meetings. I think good meetings can be very, very stimulating. Just love the sound of this company you mentioned, Anthony. I think that's really progressive. But I think that isn't important. One, what got you there won't necessarily get you to the next stage in life. So, you know, do you think they are going to change and go to 2 meetings a week? What do you think, Anthony?
I think it's a really good question because for me, you've got to work out. I think as people go through that growth and that progress, and they go to the next stage and the next stage, quite often in my experience is that they kind of forget what they did in order to get to the first goal and the second goal. And I really think there's got to be that core around what you got you there that is fit for purpose as you continue through that journey. So things like the core purpose, why do you do what you do? And then the values, how do you go about doing it? You've really got to decide and agree what they were in order to get you to those first goals. So you take them on that journey. And then it's about working out what else you need on that journey that you've done really successfully. And I don't think enough companies do that. I really don't think they analyze what are the good things that they did that you need to keep doing that got them to this point that are also going to take them to the next point. I think what a lot of companies do is go, what do we need to change in order to get us there?
That's a fascinating point, because I'm curious for this company, Anthony. I mean, was this like a deliberate decision, or was it just a sort of organic thing that happened by accident? Do you know what I mean? Because I know so many companies who just don't make choices about this stuff, right? It just sort of happens. And when you say to them, oh, why have you got these 27 meetings? No one really knows.
Yeah.
it just kind of happens.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious, was this something they did consciously, or was it just something about them and their culture where this was just what they did and what worked?
It's definitely part of their culture. It's definitely part of their culture. We all know what it's like when you set up a new business, an entrepreneurial driven business. You know, you do whatever needs to be done to get you to the end of the week, or sometimes the end of the day, or sometimes to lunchtime. That it's definitely part of their culture. It's definitely felt very natural for them to all have their own areas of expertise, to have their own areas of accountability, and to then just come together to check in and work through that. So
there's an empowering aspect to this too. So it actually is a sort of two-way street with their culture, in that by having 1 meeting a week, they kind of have to be empowering, right? Because you can't just, you can't rely on there being some big formal meeting to make every decision. You just have to say, right, we've made a decision, who's going to execute it? Now you're fully empowered and responsible to go do that, because there isn't going to be another meeting to sign it off.
And what I love about it as well is that what it's done within their business as they've grown and taken on employees is that they've, without knowing it, they've come up with a leader type mentality rather than a leader follower type mentality. So as they've continued that through the business, everybody's accountable for their particular area. They know where there's a safe place to come to if they're stuck or they've hit a real roadblock. But ultimately, you are hired to come into this business and achieve certain things. And yeah, we're going to give you the right training, we're going to give you the right support, but ultimately you're here accountable for those areas.
Do these guys have a constitution? I remember when we were in our entrepreneurs forum together, the constitution, we sat down and we all agreed the framework of how we'd interact with each other. Did these guys start with a constitution? And are you a fan of it, of those within the businesses you've founded and or working with?
And actually, I thought you were going to say what's then earlier on. I thought you were going to say what are their next steps and what are they going to do next. And I definitely think that's the next thing, because as they go from, and I think what got you here won't necessarily get you there. So what worked now, that's probably one of the next steps, isn't it? Is to have that constitution and to have that agreement as to how that's going to work going forward. Because I'm a massive fan of them, but I think at the right time. I think we've spoken before on previous founder hacks that. Timing, massive believer in the right timing.
Timing and luck. Huge part of making a business successful, I reckon.
Absolutely. So yeah, I love the idea of constitutions, and I definitely think that's one of the next things, and certainly some of the things that they're doing are building toward that already.
So guys,
Brilliant.
let's press ahead, because I think our next item here is very closely connected to this, which was something I read this week that I thought was pretty powerful and relevant, and definitely connects to this subject. So there's an article at Inc.com by a guy called Jeff Hayden. I must admit, I don't really know who he is, but he seemed like a smart fellow, judged from this article. And he made a really interesting point, very timely, considering we've all been home working for quite a long time now. Many of us who are lucky enough to have jobs where we can home work have been doing that. And he made the very interesting point that when we do shift to remote working, what a lot of businesses have tried to do is just take their schedule of meetings and just literally lift and shift that and transpose it into a digital format. And he makes the rather challenging but interesting point that he's actually encouraging companies to do less communication as they move to remote working, which I thought was really interesting and perhaps a little bit counterintuitive. And the point he makes is one that resonated with me, which is that I definitely feel I simply work differently when I'm home based. I will tend to work in different ways, to a different personal structure to that which I might use when I'm working in an office. And the point he makes really powerfully is that, of course, when we transpose our sort of regular physical meeting schedule into the digital world, it may not be right anymore. And that actually we should stop and think, actually are the sorts of check-ins and the sorts of meetings we have actually helpful? Do we need to be more thoughtful about creating chunks of open time that people can work in, rather than the more piecemeal approach that might happen during a sort of office working day? I'm not entirely sure I agree with all of it, but I thought it was a really interesting perspective. So I don't know if you guys have had a chance to have a look at the article, but would love to know what your reactions were.
Yeah, so if any of our listeners, Ben, needed to find this article, how would they find it?
Well, they will need to subscribe to Founder Hacks, Alex. If they subscribe to...
you should be in sales.
Yeah, we should say that clearly...
There's a link in there.
We're really happy to be doing this podcast, but again, we would love everyone to sign up and receive our Founder Hacks by email, which goes out once a week, which will include all the links to any articles that we're referring to here.
From the Atomics website, then you can sign up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. What about remote working?
Yeah, so I think I'll step in here because I'm incredibly opinionated about this. I think both the things we've spoken about
this.
Well, because we all have our different strengths, don't we? And definitely the people side of things is generally where I tend to step in and operate at. And I'm going to kind of take this on a step, and then you can drag me back, is quite often the case. Because for me, it's about productivity. Right? What are we trying to do? What are we trying to achieve? And what I've seen happening, and I think what we've all seen happening, is that people have gone, and it's kind of this split spirit, Ben, that you've spoken about previously as well, is that people are, especially those that are able to work from home and are busy working from home, it's really want to be seen to be busy and doing the right things during this crisis, and being seen as I'm up for the fight and I'm ready and I'll do whatever it takes to make sure that what we're doing is successful as an organization. And I think it's phenomenal. But I think what's happened is we've definitely taken what we normally do on a day-to-day face-to-face basis and tried to then put that into a remote basis. But I think what it's also led to is people working ridiculously long hours, feeling that they have to be online the whole time, feeling that they have to be contactable the whole time, contacting others the whole time, just to sort of show that, yes, we're up for the fight and we're all in this together. But actually what it comes down to is, are we actually achieving the things we need to achieve on a daily and weekly basis in order to move the business forward and in order to hit our goals? And that's what I took more from the article, was like talking to people about the constant bombardment of Slack, for instance. I mean, I think Slack has its place, and I think all these messaging tools have their place. But I want us to start. I want these businesses to start really focusing in on great productivity, which I believe wholeheartedly leads to great mental health, right? Because it's another issue at the moment. So I think if we can concentrate on less meetings, less communication, but when we do communicate, effective communication, and that people can just say, okay, I've got 3 hours to get this task done, then I need to stop and do some homeschooling, I need to stop and go out for a walk, or I need to stop and do a Joe Wicks 30 minutes, whatever it may be, that we're concentrating more on effective meetings, fewer of them, and more effective forms of communication, less bombardment, so we can lead to productivity, which I think will then lead to better mental health and us hitting the goals.
Fascinating. So I'm loving the fact that you know the well-being aspect of this, of course, which I can certainly relate to that, and seen lots of examples of people who have been experiencing intolerable stress as they're trying to prove their commitment, and as you say, working ludicrous hours, and then that pressure to be always on now, and responding in seconds to every request that might come your way. But I think the well-being aspect is really interesting, and I know, Alex, that's something that was always really important for you in terms of some of the ways that you configured the businesses that you've worked in and led and founded. What was your experience about that connection between kind of communication and well-being?
Yeah, I'm hugely, I think that was the part of one of the last businesses I was heavily involved in and founded. The culture of sort of communication, getting the communication channels sorted, and this meeting time. So again, this is the meetings had a purpose, the business had a purpose, it was all interconnected. And this whole thing, the line that we coined is busy being busy. I don't want to see people busy building on what Anthony was saying earlier. That's not how I'm going to judge how effective you are. I'm just going to judge you on your output. And I've always found that I make the best creative decisions, or the best decisions, when I'm in a calm frame of mind. I don't answer emails the day they're sent to me. I stack them up, and I like working inside a business where questions are stacked up and they're done. I don't want to, if we're working together, I don't want you to ping me 5 times a day on WhatsApp or Slack or Teams. I want you to say, can I have a chat with you for 5 minutes at the end of the hour? And then bang, 5 questions come in. And I've always felt the quicker I respond to things, the emails, WhatsApp, the more I'm sent, and I can't get any work done. So yeah, I feel, to me, I want to end the day satisfied. I've achieved things. I work from a to-do list, not from my inbox, which is really, my inbox is just a list of other people's tasks, other people's to-dos. My own task list, which is written down on a piece of paper, is something, my sort of thing I gravitate to every day. And when I get it working, not always, but when I get it working, that's when I feel most satisfied. And I feel like I'm inside a business where I'm satisfied. My colleagues are left this trust. They're left to do things, and not constantly, have you done this? I've got this question. Where's that file? Can you send me that? Where did that go? Or could you email that to me again? And distractions, the ability to get work done from this bombardment. So yeah, I'm hugely into the structure and processes of communication inside a business, and spending time workshopping that. And so everyone buys into it. And I think I've seen fantastic results in terms of well-being and productivity as a result. Does that answer your question?
I think it absolutely does. I mean, I've certainly experienced, I'm sure we've all experienced, but I've certainly experienced that sort of death by email addiction that I think you find in a lot of businesses, where you just have that constant flow. I mean, the dreaded CC, where you have these enormous email. And the thing that I always really noticed was there's two things that seem to play out when you have that sort of over communicative culture. It's almost like by putting someone on CC, you immediately deny any responsibility for the content of that email. Oh, but you were CC'd. Well, do you know what I mean? So suddenly I have no accountability for actually checking in with you or having a conversation because I put you in CC in this 27 long email thread. And the other thing I love about what you've shared there is something about respect. And there was a lovely technique that I did try for a little while in a business I was leading, which was, in response to those interruptions, which will come, of course, from time to time, saying to people, okay, you can have 5 minutes in an hour, or you can have an hour in a week's time. Which would you prefer? And astonishingly, it was interesting how quickly people started to go, well, actually, no, I'll take the hour in a week. Great. Then we can have a proper conversation about it. Do you know what I mean? So, or 5 minutes now, and half an hour tomorrow, just to give people that sense of, are you ready for this conversation? And I think that preparedness that we create as an expectation, that it shows a lot of respect for people. And I think that can work every which way in a company, whether it's about people reporting into people who are managing them, or whether it's the other way around and managers looking to communicate with people that are working in their teams. There's something about, actually, are you ready for this conversation, or are you still at that point of it's a stream of consciousness? And actually, do you not have a little bit of responsibility to organize your thoughts before you actually impose on a colleague and start demanding their time?
So I think people will solve more of their own problems by putting that buffer of delay in. It's like, I can talk to you in a week, in an hour. And I would guess, Ben, that a lot of the things they thought they wanted to talk to you about in that week had either solved themselves or they'd fixed it themselves without you going, what shall I do?
Very frequently.
And I think that just sort of summing that up really and bringing that to a bit of a conclusion, using an example and a story of our own, is that, one of the boards that we all sit on, we have a board meeting currently every fortnight, which is normally it's once a month, but under the current circumstances, once a fortnight. We have an hour and 15 minutes. We have 5 areas to cover with 15 minutes each. And that does mean that for each area, people have to come prepared, right? They have to come prepared. All of the stuff that you're normally used to doing on a 2 or 3 hour meeting is you don't have time for that. So you have to come prepared. So you have to respect everybody else's time. So you only have 5 minutes to update everybody on what the situation is. You have to have done your homework. You have to have your stats, the data. And I'm amazed how much we get done in that hour and a quarter every 2 weeks, because you've got that structure where we're so respectful of everybody's time that you have to come prepared. Otherwise, you're just wasting that time, wasting that opportunity.
Well, that's a beautiful segue, Mr. Enright, to the next section, which is learned.
So what have we learned, gentlemen, this week? I think, Alex, you had something you were going to share with us around.
Well, I touched upon it earlier, really. The theme of today's podcast is meetings. And the learned angle, when we discussed this earlier, was really, the dynamic in a meeting, and the people who self-discount themselves, and maybe the quietest people in a meeting who often aren't heard often have fantastic ideas. And this whole concept of equal talk time, and not this sort of bowing down to the hippo, the highest paid person in the room. And I think that type of culture where we go around, and this is when we had our forum together, guys, is okay. We were very disciplined in that regard, because as you guys know, we put up a clock and said, right, you've got 2 minutes, next you've got 2 minutes, you've got 2 minutes. And I feel like the meetings that I've been in the companies I've involved in, where all the people are listened to, and some of these very different opinions or very different upbringings, walks of life, cultures, speakers of different languages, all of a different way of thinking, and putting that into the pot, and has been very, very productive. I mean, Anthony, you had some this is a topic that you originally threw into the pot. You want to expand upon that?
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. And I think you've always, what was the saying? You've always got to be worried about the quiet person in the corner, And for me, whenever I'm facilitating or coaching or chairing a meeting, I always want to hear from the quietest person in the room. And what I tend to find is when I first start working with them is that the first thing they say is, and when I ask them to present something, is that they'll say things like, "I'm not sure about this, but I don't really know about, but this is going to sound ridiculous, but," and I'm always hold my breath when I hear that, because generally when people say that, you're about to have a light bulb moment, because they're about to say something that nobody else has said. They're thinking, as you said, Alex, earlier, they're thinking completely differently to everybody else. So whilst other people in the room are sort of putting their eyes to heaven and going, "Oh, what they're going to come out with," I'm like, I want complete silence. I want to hear exactly what they've got to say.
Yeah.
Because most of the time they are, and all of a sudden they take the conversation and the debate into the right direction and think about, and they've absolutely hit the nail on the head as to what we need to be discussing next. So for me, that's why things you said there, Alex, equal talk time. But also sometimes when you don't have that structure, it's just about making sure whoever's coaching or facilitating gives everybody the opportunity. And especially on Zoom at the moment, I did a call the other day, there were 24 people on it. So I actually literally had to write everybody's name down. So I went old school. I literally wrote everybody's name down, did my quick graph, and then every time they spoke, I ticked their name off so that I made sure that I could come back to them and give everybody. Now, equal talk time with 24 people is tricky, but just who haven't I heard from for a while? Look at my chart, bang, this person. And they go, "Well, I'm not really sure, but," magic.
Lovely. The art of moderating a meeting. It's so few people know how to do it well. And Ben, what are you thinking?
I really like this one for a couple of reasons. I think it's a great one. I mean, my 15 years spent dealing with mostly very large companies and the sort of management and leadership training they deliver. And I must concede, I know a lot of coaches and sort of management 101 type training that would try to sort of beat this self-discounting language out of people. So this idea of, including a level of apology in what you're saying. So I'm not sure about this, but, oh, I don't know, but, oh, this might sound ridiculous, but, and again, I'm afraid to say, I think it's a bit of a 1980s thing where we should all speak powerfully all the time and just only speak sure. And I think the world's moved on, and I think it's really important that the world moves on, and that as leaders and founders of businesses, we move on. That actually what we're talking about here is creating an inclusive environment. And I thought Anthony's example there was wonderful, because creating an inclusive environment is something that you do. It's not something that happens by accident. You do it differently. And making sure you do have equal talk time, making sure you have that tolerance for different types of expression, for different levels of confidence in the room, and that being okay, rather than what I worry about that happens sometimes is that because somebody expresses themselves in this softer, more gentle way, in a less confident way, we suddenly attach the fact that their opinion must be worth less. Think about it rationally, it's complete nonsense. It could be the opposite is true, that somebody who's using language that I would perhaps describe as exploratory or as a bit more vulnerable, surely we should be making sure there's space for people to express in that way, rather than just the people who express themselves with a high level of assertion all the time. And of course,
I'm with you. I used to have a colleague who used to pick up he used to always call me and go, "Oh, hi, it's only me." Go, "What do you mean it's only you? That's so awful. It's only me." And then I started to joke with him, go, "Oh, is that only me? Oh, hello, only me." And we used to make a joke out of it, and he gradually stopped saying it. But yeah, I mean, I collect quotes, as you two know, and one of my quotes I like quiet people. A lot of my friends are quiet people. And there's a Mark Twain quote I like, and I've got it up in front of me now. It is better to keep one's mouth shut and be thought a fool than to open it and remove all doubt. So, yeah, I like that one, you know, and it makes a lot of sense to me.
I do like
Yeah,
that. And at the same time, I do think building environments where people feel safe to open their mouths and maybe to be a fool can sometimes open up new avenues
yes,
of thinking that otherwise we wouldn't have. So I think it's an interesting contradiction and dilemma that we have here between, yes, wanting an environment where people are prepared to have the conversation and are speaking thoughtfully, but at the same time, we're careful we don't close people down just because their style of expression is different to our own, or to perhaps what the predominant paradigm is in business at the moment. We're all trained that, all the media representation of good business people often does include this sort of very assertive, bullish, quite masculine way of communicating. And actually, I think what a lot of businesses are learning now is that we need to be much more accommodating of a broader range of styles and different ways of communicating. And okay, only need, okay, we might take, might give some feedback about that, but at the same time, we shouldn't be creating a culture and environment that excludes someone because
sure.
they have that habitual style of expression.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's good. It's not because it's touchy feely or it's nice or, it's good business, and good businesses are more profitable and they're nicer places to work and more inspiring places to work. And as a founder, if you can point all these things in the right direction, these businesses then, it's the flywheel. They start to turn on themselves and grow without the founder being there driving it and pushing it. And I think, this is good business. It's good business practice. It's also a nice way to interact with fellow human beings. So, and ultimately as founders, you want your business to succeed and do well and be as profitable as they can be. And that's, to me, it's good business. And it's also a nice way of interacting with people.
And on that note, it feels like a good time to wrap up, guys. So we're at time. Anything further to add? We've had a great conversation about meetings. It's amazing, isn't it? Starting a conversation about meetings and the simple practices and rules, and it so quickly it becomes so broad about the cultures that we build to create fantastic performances in the businesses that we work with. And I think that's what I take away from this is, what may seem like a very simple basic rule that we put in place in our business, or a way of working we try to create as a custom, the outcome we get is actually much more fundamental than that, and impacts our culture, our performance, and ultimately the profitability and the value that we create in the businesses that we're involved with. So a fascinating conversation. Any final thoughts?
Not from me.
I just think my final one, because I know a lot of people are struggling at the moment with productivity, and a lot of people are struggling with email. And just Alex's moment there when he said, I have my list, my to-do list. Email is just other people's to-do list, right? and I think for those of you, anyone listening that's really struggling with email, is what's more important? Is it your to-do list or others' to-do list? And I know you're there to support and help others, but I question why we continually are helping others complete their to-do lists when we've got our own as well. And I just love that.
Very good. Right. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you to Alex Moore. Thank you to Anthony Enright. That was Atomic's Founder Hacks. If you'd like to subscribe, all of our Founder Hacks are available on a weekly email. We try to send out usually on a Tuesday to give you some insights and inspirations that we've collected and curated from the businesses we're working with. I'm Ben Thomas. We're Atomics, and thank you very much for listening.